George of the jungle, swing from tree to tree. Okay, this time I got the reference right correctly. I finally got it correctly. Well, anyways, it's me, the media guy. And guess what? I'm checking out a movie that I haven't seen in a very, 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 very long time called, well, George of the Jungle. Now, if any of you guys are like huge fans of like George of the Jungle, then I assume that you might have stumbled across this movie at some point. I mean, and I know I have, because I actually remember growing up with this movie before, as well as the sequel several times. And I will admit, it's been a very, 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 very long time since I checked out George of the Jungle and its sequel. And I'm actually glad I got a chance to check this out again for the very first time. Now, I'm sure some of you probably never even seen this movie before, let alone heard of it. So have no fear, there's a description on the back of the VHS tape. Disney presents the smash hit comedy that families and critics everywhere went bananas for. Okay, that's funny. Deep in the heart of the African jungle, a baby named George, the sole survivor of a plane crash, is raised by gorillas. George grows up to be a buffed and lovable klutz who has a rainforest full of animal friends, like Tookie, a big manager ape, a talking gorilla who's smarter than the average rocket scientist. Okay, I'm not sure if that's meant to be like a Yogi Bear reference. And Shep, a gray-haired, peanut-loving pooch of an elephant. When poachers mess with George's pals, the king of swing swings into action, but before you can say, "Watch out for that tree!" George comes face to bark with a few vine-covered obstacles. You'll go wild for this wonderfully wacky comedy that People magazines calls impossible to resist. Oh boy, so I'm not gonna lie, after rewatching it again for the very, 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 very first time, and no, this isn't like a second look, aka revisit edition review, this movie is still downright hilarious. It seems to stay true to the original 1960s cartoon of the same name. I like the African settings. It does have a fantastic plot with a beginning, middle, and end. There's lots of fourth wall jokes, mainly from the characters and the narrator himself. And I freaking love the casting choices. Mainly Brendan Fraser himself as George of the Jungle. Now, I assume that Brendan Fraser himself must have grew up with the cartoon at some point to actually study it so that he'll get the role of George. So shout out to Brendan Fraser for playing George of the Jungle. I actually do like the puppet effects for Ape and how it's done by the Jim Henson Creature Shop. I actually like how they didn't go CGI with the apes. Okay, gorillas and apes are almost like similar to me anyway. And they didn't have to use any CGI effects for Ape and his fellow apians. Now I'm guessing for a few close-up shots for Shep the elephant, I think he was oftentimes operated by a few puppeteers, and they did some CGI scenes for like the wide shots. Now just to make him look very believable and convincing. Now, whenever you guys think of George of the Jungle, I assume that you're probably thinking of the anime series that used to air on Cartoon Network back in the late 2000s. Because that was the one I used to grew up watching all the time, which was back when I had cable. And I used to have this movie on VHS and DVD all the time, as well as the sequel. Now, I gotta admit, I think this movie is 28 years old, if I'm correct. So in 2 more years, this film would have been 30 years old. Or am I wrong? Or has it been like 25 years? I don't know. You guys might want to let me know down in the comments below. Oh man, the group of vultures are really something, right? They all captured George's ape family. I guess it's up to George to save their lives. Now, I assume some of you might compare George of the Jungle to Tarzan, which, admittedly, I guess I can sort of understand why. Both Tarzan and George of the Jungle are probably similar in their own unique way, but completely different from each other. Wait, okay, maybe in a nutshell, maybe they're not that different from each other, since Tarzan and George of the Jungle are probably similar to each other. But you know what? I probably won't make a big deal over it. And it's actually nice that George gets to find true love of his own kind, Ursula, who is actually studying the apes on Ape Mountain. Of course, she has to deal with her jerk of a fiance, Lyle, who's kind of like a bit of a nitwit and a jerk at times. And he can be a bit of a greedy goon as well. Only wants Ursula for himself. Thank goodness that Ursula came to her senses and realized that George is right for her. And who could blame her? George is pretty handsome, and well, I don't blame all the girls for going banana when I was over him. I honestly think this is one of Brendan Fraser's most amazing roles. Right up there with the Mummy movie, Looney Tunes Back in Action, and probably a few other movies that he starred in that I may or may not have heard of before, or even seen before either. Now, I don't know if Brendan Fraser himself is still doing a lot of TV and movie roles right now as we speak. I mean, I'm sure he's already working on a few new upcoming movies right now as I'm recording this review, which is actually pretty good that Brendan Fraser is still in the acting business. I think he might have had a bit of a rough patch, like probably 5, 6, 7, or 8 years ago, and managed to get his groove back, which is pretty understandable. I mean, even actors and actresses in Hollywood had to go through a lot of personal drama until they can get their act together again. And yeah, I know since I might be planning on reviewing George of the Jungle 2 soon, I am aware that Brendan Fraser was replaced by another actor. Heck, even the sequel even poked fun of it by pointing that out. So even the movie is self-aware. Oops, I won't. Sorry for the little spoilers for the sequel. Now, aside from Brendan Fraser, I don't know what the rest of the cast and crew are doing right now after they've finished working on George of the Jungles 1 and 2. Maybe they're working on other movies and TV shows right now as we speak. And like I said before, the Puppeteer puppet effects for Ape and the rest of the apes are pretty groundbreaking. And then, it's cool that the Jim Henson Creature Shop was involved in this. And yes, I do know that they were also involved for the puppet effects for the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, which is pretty cool. And it's also ironic that Disney ended up owning the rights to the Muppets back in the 90s. And you know, this might be me going completely off topic here, but just imagine if the Muppets did their own Georgia the spoof at some point. I mean, if they could do their own version of a Muppet of the Christmas Carol and the Wizard of Oz, why not spoof on Georgia the Jungle? I mean, yeah, I know they'll be impossible to pull off, but you never know. So anyways, I honestly think Georgia the Jungle is still fantastic in its own unique way. It's very funny, has a great soundtrack, great plot, fantastic characters, great casting choices, and I love this African location. And you know, at times I couldn't tell if it was like, I think most of the movie was filmed in Africa, while the rest was filmed in San Francisco. And I'm guessing they didn't have to like go to any film sets. They actually had to go to some real life locations for the movie, which is pretty genius. Now, I assume that the filmmakers, as well as the cast and crew, probably had to study the original 1960s Georgia the Jungle cartoon, so that way they could be familiar with Georgia the Jungle in general, which I totally understand. And sorry that I sound a little funny in this review. I just have a bit of a stuffy nose, that's all. Sorry about that. So anyways, Georgia the Jungle is still a fantastically hilarious movie for all fans to enjoy. And who knows, maybe someday I might do a second look review of this movie at some point. But anyways, I'll give this movie 5 lion heads out of 5. Because that's how hilariously bananas this movie is. And if you guys have any fond memories of Georgia the Jungle, let me know down in the comments below. Oh, and before I wrap this up, the iconic Georgia the Jungle theme song really kicks ass. I mean, it just goes like Georgia the Jungle, ba da 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 da. I mean, I'm telling you, that song is like, it's like so irresistible and catchy. I mean, that's like the type of song you would hear in like parties or whatnot. You know, it's just a very irresistible song.